The central mitzvahs of Leil Seder are well known. I'd like to focus on really the mitzvah min ha-Torah of Haggadah to Levincha, which is the mitzvahs asay, one of the Tariq mitzvahs of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, telling over the story. Why is it so important to tell over the story, and what are we really doing when we're telling over the story? And this is something which goes to the very heart of the magic of Leil Seder. Understanding the story, telling it over, and repeating it every year has a profound effect on every member of Klal Yisrael in a very interesting way. I'd like to mention a few things about it. First of all, just a general practical tip, which I do at my Seder nights and which I recommend to everybody, and that is that alcohol is not necessarily beneficial to everybody around the table. Men, women, and children alike. Alcohol, to some people, makes them drowsy, other people makes them a little bit hyper, and therefore, at my Leil Seder, the first case of wine is only grape juice. We don't even offer wine to anybody. It's not on the table. It's not being offered. Everybody gets a glass of grape juice. After we finished telling the story of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, then we can, for the second case, you can have as much wine as you like, and the third case and the fourth case. But in the beginning, wine is actually not recommended. And it's interesting, some people discuss it and say, well, grape juice is not really the main mitzvah. One should do properly with wine. If you look in the poskim, you'll find that the Brisker Rav only had grape juice, and the Chazon Ish only had grape juice, and the Chabina Rav only had grape juice. Lots of Gedolei Yisrael only had grape juice. And why did they do that? Because there's a principle. When you, in Pirkei Avos, have a bechashev schar mitzvah keneged hefseda. When you're doing a mitzvah, you have to use your brain. You have to make a cheshbon. It's true, maybe there is a little preference of wine over grape juice, but in actual fact, the price you pay for it is that you can't properly fulfill the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Telling the story, that is the main issue, and understanding it and engaging with everybody around the table. And therefore, it's a good idea to leave alcohol to the second half of the Seder night, to the time of having the meal, and then in that way you've already done the mitzvah of the Haggadah. A closer look, actually, at the mitzvahs of Seder, on Leil Seder, are very fascinating, because we find, and this is in many of the Sifrei Hasidus, but actually I saw this outlined in the Sefer Nefesh of Ruach of Volozhin, speaks about it at great length, that all our mitzvahs come into three categories, and they are Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. These are three different words used to describe the spiritual power of a human being. But the Nefesh is more the physical side of it, and the Ruach is more the speech side of it, and the Neshama is more the mental, conceptual side of the mitzvah. And all mitzvahs really are connected in some way to, it's either a mitzvah of machshava, a mitzvah of dibur, or a mitzvah of maisa. Right? These are three different types of mitzvah. Some mitzvahs are just maisa. The mitzvah is the act of shaking the lulav. That is a mitzvah, of a practical mitzvah, right? There's some mitzvahs which are just dibur, or just speech, and that is like Kriya Shema, Birkas Hamazon. And then there are some mitzvahs of machshava, which are Yiras Shamayim and Emunah, and Losa Surach Ilavavcha. These are mitzvahs tamidios, which are mental mitzvahs. So these are three different classifications of mitzvahs. What's interesting is, says the Rabbeinu Bachaye, what's interesting about Leil Seder is that we do it on all three levels. I'll explain to you what I mean. All three levels means that on Leil Seder we are doing the mitzvah lemaisa, the practical side of the mitzvah is eating the matzah and eating the moror. That is a mitzvah of the nefesh. And then we have the Ruach. The Ruach is dibur. The Ruach represents our power of speech, our power of conceptual understanding, and that is the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, telling over the story. You have to tell it. The mitzvah of reciting the Haggadah and understanding it. And then there is the mitzvah of emunah. Leil Seder is a time of strengthening our emunah in hashgacha v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in our commitment to the covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama all present in the mitzvahs of Leil Seder. What's interesting is, Rabbeinu Bachaye says that if you look at the way Chazal told us how to get rid of the chametz, we find also there that really all the Torah says is Tashbisus Orim Batechem, to get rid of the chametz before Pesach comes in. What did Chazal do? They made out of it a mitzvah which has three different parts. One part is the lamaisa, the burning of the chametz. That is the practical eradication of the chametz. That is the nefesh. Then there is the ruach, the dibur, which is the kol chamira, the statement that we have to say, which is disowning it. And then there is the machshava. The machshava is that it should be hefka ka'afra da'ara, that we think about chametz as something which is like the dust of the earth. So also with regards to the biur chametz, we are doing it on all three levels: the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. So in a sense, it's the flip side of what's happening on Leil Seder. On Leil Seder, we are affirming our emunah in all three ways. And on Erev Pesach, we are destroying the chametz in all three ways, because the chametz represents in some way the dark side of human nature. There's a Gemara in Brachas Daf Yud Zayin, where the Gemara says, we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you HaKadosh Baruch Hu, know she'ritzonenu lasas ritzoncha, that in essence, deep down, we want to do the Ratzon Hashem, we want to do the right thing. But mima akev, what is the problem? The problem is sa'ar shebe'isa. That's what the Gemara says. The sa'ar shebe'isa, which means the yeast in the dough. It means the ego. It means the anger, the dark side of human nature. That is what interferes. And therefore, the biur chametz is getting rid of the negativity within ourselves in order to be able to go into Seder night and to embrace the moment of Leil Seder on all three levels. And I think this is a very beautiful understanding of Leil Seder. I'd like to add that just generally the way of running a Seder night requires a certain amount of foresight and a certain amount of introductions. I feel that introductions are something which are a key to a Leil Seder. So, for example, when you come to Seder night, you don't sit down and make Kiddush, or stand up and make Kiddush. You don't do that. You first sit down and give a speech. That now we're about to start the Leil Seder, and get one of the kids to have a job to read out Kaddish Urchatz Kapras Yachat Magid Rochta Motzi Matzah, and speak about that a little bit. And then explain that this year, actually, Kiddush has got three separate mitzvahs all rolled into one. One is the Kiddush welcoming the Yontov. The second is the Havdalah for the departing Shabbos. And the third one is that it's the first of the Arba Kosos, the 4 cups. And therefore, before you even drink the first cup, before you make Kiddush, is a good time to ask people if they know anything about the meaning of the Arba Kosos. So I'd just like to add an idea which is not... which is, I think, quite well known, but I think it's worth developing a little bit, and that is that the Arba Kosos and the 4 matzahs represent the Arba Imohos and the Shlosha Ovos. When we come to Leil Seder, we're not coming out of the blue. We're not coming as individuals from a blank past. We're standing on the shoulders of the Arba Imohos and the Shlosha Ovos. That the 3 matzahs are Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the 4 kosas are Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And what you should do is, before you drink the first kos, ask somebody or do yourself speak a little bit about Sarah Imenu, what she did and what was her role, and what a woman she was, how she was a partner to Avram Avinu. Avram Megayes Anoshim, but Sarah Megayeres Anoshim, says Rashi. And not only that, the way she lived all her life without children until 90 years old before she gave birth to Yitzchak. And the achievements of Sarah Imenu should be something that you speak about before you drink the first kos. So in actual fact, this should be, in order to enhance the meal, to go through each kos. You can even give a job to maybe one of the, if you've got any teenage girls around who want a job on Seder night, they should prepare 2 minutes to say about each of the Arba Imohos, and in that way include them and involve them in Leil Seder. And this comes from the Shloh HaKodesh, says that the main symbolism of the Arba Kosas is the Arba Imohos. When it comes to the Shlosha Ovos, so there's also a very interesting addition to the idea that the three matzahs are Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and this is an idea which I said a few years ago, but worth repeating. Everything on Leil Seder has been said years ago, but always worth repeating, and that is a Gemara in Maseches Shabbos Daf Peites, where the Gemara there speaks about a midrashic conversation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have b'achris hayom in the times of Mashiach. And it says there that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to have a dilemma. What's he going to do with all those members of Klal Yisrael who were rebels, who didn't engage in mitzvahs, who did Aveirus, what's he going to do with them? Ba'achris hayomim, in the time of Yimos HaMashiach. So the Gemara says he went to Avram, and Avram said, look, people who have done bad things have to endure the consequences. And he went to Yaakov, he said the same thing, and in the end he goes to Yitzchak Avinu. And Yitzchak Avinu says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yitzchak Avinu, Bonecha chotuli, your children have sinned to me. To which Yitzchak says, what? Bonai v'loi bonecha? They're not my children, they're your children, right? And the whole conversation Yitzchak Avinu has, and Yitzchak Avinu becomes the Sanega, the council for defense, Ba'achris hayomim, for those members of Klal Yisrael who have drifted away from Torah and mitzvahs. And to cut a long story short, it's a very beautiful thing. At the end of the day, Yitzchak says, well, how bad could they be already? They haven't done such terrible things. And if they have done it, then palga olai or palga olecha. That's a beautiful line there in the Gemara. I'm willing to take half responsibility, and you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should take the other half responsibility. And that's that. And with regards to my half of responsibility for them, I've already offered my life up, Akedas Yitzchak, as a korban, and therefore in that way we can find a mechila, a forgiveness for those people who have lost their connection to Yiddishkeit over the generations. And this is Yitzchak Avinu in a beautiful new light. We don't often see Yitzchak Avinu in this light as the Sanega for Klal Yisrael, but what's beautiful to see is that on Leil Seder, one of the things we do is we take the middle matzah, which is Yitzchak Avinu, and we break it in half at Yachatz. And at Yachatz, we're breaking it in half. The simple reason for breaking it in half is because we've got two mitzvahs of Achilas Matzah. One is the first Kazayas, and one is the last Kazayas. So we break it in half to make sure we have matzahs both at the beginning of the meal and a matzah at the end of the meal. That's a simple halachic meaning. But the deeper meaning is that this middle matzah is Yitzchak Avinu. And he's coming to defend Klal Yisrael b'achris hayomim, and he says palga olai or palga olecha, and that is half is my responsibility and half is yours, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and together we're going to forgive them. And this is a beautiful perush on the Arba Imohos and the Shlosha Ovos who accompany us, and by going through the Leil Seder and telling the Sipur, so that Maral says that the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is not just about the Geula that happened then, but it's the Sheresh of all future redemptions. All future redemptions have their roots in Yetzias Mitzrayim, in the Geulas Mitzrayim, up to and including the Geula Acharona, and that has to be our Kosher Leo Hanovi, our final thought at the end of the Leil Seder, that Be'ez Hashem, all the power of the Geulas Mitzrayim throughout the Deiros should find its fruition in the Geula for Klal Yisrael in our days. Amen. Chayei Yirot.